Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Student Development Administrators Associate, or not association, but the System Office update. We welcome everybody this morning. As a reminder, we are recording this session and we will provide that link as soon as it becomes available to everyone. Also, as a reminder, please mute your microphones and your telephones. If you're on the telephone, we ask that you please do not put us on hold, so we have to listen to your hold music, and we would appreciate that greatly. I believe that Dr. Gold may be on the line and wanted to say hello to everybody. So, Dr. Gold, are you there?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to spend a little time with you this morning, and I am looking forward to us being able to share some updates, but also possibly hearing a few updates from all of you. It's hard for me to believe we are almost at the end of pandemic semester number 2, or well, if you count summer, I guess number 3. But hope everyone is doing well. We are certainly doing well here at the system office. There's a lot going on and we're very busy, and I'm really proud to say that our team here at the system office, much like your teams at the colleges, we're continuing to move forward and think about how to serve students. So I've heard so many people brag on our colleges and the way that they've been flexible and adapted and just really been able to turn on a dime to serve students. And I think I'm so proud of our colleges and our system office staff and all that we've done. But at the same time, I think that's just what we do. That's who we are. We adapt to our communities and we serve our communities, and we do what it takes to help our students be successful. So I'm just proud to be a part of you and the work that you're doing. And thank you again. I know you're very busy, and so appreciate your time this morning to hear a few updates from the team. So thanks, JW, for giving me just a few minutes to say hello.
Yes, ma'am, and we're glad you were able to join us. We have a small agenda today. That's not in reference to the impact of the report that Bill's going to share to us, but just that we don't have many items on the agenda. I do want to take a moment to thank everybody, as Dr. Gold did, for all the work that you've been doing this semester to serve students. We also understand that in December, end of semester activities and registration for spring, 2 things going on majorly impact your time and availability. So thank you for joining us this December. So we wanted to keep the agenda a little smaller, but we also wanted to seize the opportunity of a new report about RISE. And so we're glad that Bill was able to join us. As I unshare my screen and he starts getting his PowerPoint pulled up for us, I do want to remind everybody, though, that there are a variety of reports with the GEARS scholarship and the other federal money that we've been sending out. And we know that some of those reporting requirements have been a little burdensome. We apologize for that, and we appreciate your timely reports and getting that information sent to each of us, whether it's the GEAR funding or Golden Leaf or any of those things. So thank you for getting those reports to us in a timely manner, because we're beholden to other people to provide reports. And so it helps us to meet those deadlines when you are able to get it to us. So without further ado, I look forward to hearing Bill's report, and I'll turn the mic and the screen over to you, Bill.
Thanks, JW. Good morning, everyone. And JW, just let me know if you see my screen. Let's see. You see it?
Yes, sir. You're up and running.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks again, JW, and good morning, everyone. And I don't want to say this is the first time I've done this presentation, but it's the first time I've done this exact presentation. So we've been doing a lot of preliminary RISE analysis for about the past month or two, and every time that I present this data, it's really kind of refinement of the presentation before. So what you guys are going to see today is fresh and new, and there's some additional analysis that we've not been able to get to in the past. So I guess start off with one thing that has not changed in any of our analysis is really the population that we're looking at as far as looking at success rates. So when we look at our success rates across various metrics, we're talking about first-time students or social degree seeking students and this excludes CCP students, so no high school students are included in this analysis. So if you think about anybody who walks on your campus for the first time and let's just say fall semester, we're tracking their progress for 2 cohorts, and that's a fall 18 and fall 19 cohort. So thinking about fall 18 is before RISE implementation, and fall 19 would be post implementation. So here are the metrics we looked at. So two should look very familiar to you. They're based on the completion college level math and English. These metrics don't go as far out as our state performance measures do, but it looks at the first semester success, so what percent of your students successfully complete college level math within that first fall semester, and the same with the English metric. Then we look at the first semester college level credits accumulated. So, what is the average number of hours these students complete at the college level? So this would be 100 or plus courses during that first semester. Then look at those fall students again. What's the fall to spring persistence rate? So what percentage of your fall students in that first time cohort persist to the spring semester? And then also, which I think are probably the best metrics when assessing the impact of RISE, is actually looking at that first year successful completion rate of college level math or English, because that's really kind of what RISE is geared towards, is trying to get students through math and English in a timely manner. So that's why the first year is probably the best metric. But I did note there the COVID impact. So with the fall 18 group, it didn't have to deal with COVID in the spring, but the fall 19 group did. So I also noted there too is that our analysis only goes through spring, so the metric is slightly a little bit different, but still the analysis is pretty consistent. So we compared really two big groups of colleges. So really all 58 split into 2 groups. We had the 2 pilot groups. We had pilot A that started in spring 19 with RISE, and we had pilot B groups that started in fall 19. And then we had the non-RISE schools as well. So I do want to point out too that this is not, these comparison groups are include all of our demographic comparisons as far as success rates, but it does not include the high school GPA analysis. And that's probably the most important piece, because we know that the policy associated with RISE is preliminary, and the same with multiple measures, is really driven by that high school GPA. So for high school GPA, we had to remove a lot of schools because we have a lot of data, a lot of schools that are not reporting their high school GPAs on XRISE screens. So what I did was we looked at the, which colleges reported less than 50% of first-time students with GPAs in fall 18 or fall 19. We took them out of the analysis. And then we did the same thing again with those who had less than 10% of those that reported with less than 2.6, because I think what we're finding is that a lot of colleges that are doing multiple measures, if a student does not meet the 2.6 threshold, they're just not entering that GPA information. So that left us with these 2 groups here for the high school GPA analysis. So I believe it was 21 pilot schools, and I think we had, you had 21 pilot schools and 11 non-RISE schools for the high school GPA analysis. So once again, all the analysis focuses on all 58, but when we're looking at high school GPA, it's limited to this list of schools here. All right, so also what we look at, like 2 different ways. So I mentioned the GPA, we got age. So I think really age and GPA are probably the main things that are probably directly linked to policy, because we know that, with multiple measures, there's a 5-year high school GPA expiration. There's about 10 years. So looking at kind of what is the difference in age groups as far as their success rates. But that GPA piece, once again, is the most important piece. So when we look at these metrics, we're thinking about these measures here as far as these disaggregations for age and GPA are probably tightly related to the policy. But we also have a lot of things that, are really indirectly impacted, especially from an equity perspective. Think about Pell, thinking about race, ethnicity, and think about the intersection of race, ethnicity, and sex. Just a reminder, these are just in general. I know there's a lot more that goes with these policies, but just kind of just pointing out what the differences from the GPA perspective are with multiple measures versus RISE. So with multiple measures, a student could place out of developmental by either an ACT, SAT, or placement test. With RISE, the only way they can place out of developmental is by ACT or SAT. The 2.2259 group with multiple measures, they could place out by developmental, with the ACT, SAT, and place test, so same as it with the lesson 2.2. But here's where RISE is a big difference here is that, they can also place out based on those 3 criteria, but they're also, if they don't place out, they're eligible for the COREC. The 2.6 to 2.79 group, in multiple measures, there is no development requirement. They go straight into credit level coursework. For RISE, they could place out developmental. Same with ACT, SAT, or placement. But once again, too, just like the 2.2, 2.59 group, they're eligible for the COREC. And anything greater than or equal to 2.80 is pretty consistent between the multiple measures and RISE. And just this kind of GPA unknown piece, it's hard to say what colleges or really where these students fall in. I think these private students tend to fall in to less than 2 to 2.2 to 2.59 just based on their success rates, but it's hard to tell. These are ones where we do not have information on those students, but I still reported it anyways just to kind of give you a heads up, and then we'll leave that group out from a GPA perspective. All right, so I mentioned this before, looking at success rate comparison. We're looking at the fall 18 success rates versus fall 19 across all those various metrics. And there's 2 ways we're looking at measuring results. So when we look at 18 and 19, we're looking really change of percentages pretty much. So we look at the fall 19 results divided by fall 18 results minus 1. So I guess an example here would be if there was a shift of a 2% success rate to a 4% success rate, it would be a 100% success rate change because you're doubling the success rate from 2 to 4. However, if you look at net change, it is only a 2% change. So once again, if we use the example of a shift from 2 to 4%, for percent change, it would be 100% change, and for net change, it would be 2%. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. And then for the comparison, this is really what we've done a lot differently for presentations of the data is that now we're just focusing on what the difference in success rate shifts were between the RISE pilot schools and non-RISE pilot schools. So aggregating all the data across all the different colleges, what are we seeing the success rate shifts amongst these different groups of students, really based on all those disaggregations I mentioned before. So, where are we seeing increases in success rates for RISE versus non-RISE? Is one flat, one up? Is one up, one flat? Is one or both up? So, for instance, if both things were down, if both areas were down, then really we wouldn't see really kind of much of a difference between what we're seeing in the non-RISE schools or pilots, or if they're both up. But if we do see them going in different directions, those are areas that we're trying to highlight in this presentation. And really, I also want to point out too that this is nothing that's really scientific or so it's really once again based on these 2 metrics here. And then I'm also going to point out too, here's how I kind of color code things throughout. So when we look at the first 2 and last 2 metrics, focus on completion of math and English. We're looking at, and once again too, if you look at the left columns here, this is based on those things that are more correlated to really the policy itself, and these are more indirect. So the strength in order of getting a different color is higher here than is on the right-hand side with the Pell, race, ethnicity, and sex piece. So anything that has a positive 20% difference and a positive 4% difference for RISE, you'll see something with a dark green positive sign. Anything that has a one or the other, you'll see a lighter green positive sign. Anything you see nothing, as far as there's no indication, just means it kind of falls in between this criteria and what's below. And then really look at the yellow and oranges. If there's a negative 20% difference or a negative 4% difference, you'll see a almost like orangish yellowish negative sign. And then you'll see a dark orange negative sign for anything where we see a negative 20% difference, and negative 4% or more difference. So that's how this will highlight GPA. And for really the Pell, race, ethnicity, and sex, it's the same thing, except for, once again, these are not so associated with the policy itself. They're more indirect. So I pretty much just took those percentages and divided by half. All right, now looking at the successful completion of college level credits, if we looked at really here we're just looking at really a range. If there's a positive 8% difference, then it's a dark green, light green for 4 to 7.9% difference. Anything that's in between a less than a 4% positive difference to a negative 4% negative difference, then they're not color coded. And then you see the two on the opposite end here, opposite end of the spectrum. And here, once again, just cut the criteria in half for the demographic groups. And then fall spring persistence rate, similar to ones in the past, just different percent thresholds. And I'm not going to go into more detail about this because you're probably also already falling asleep to me going through these slides here. So I'll jump to the data. So looking first at first semester successful completion rate of college level math. So we see that really, this has always historically been a challenge for us. And I think it's really kind of an impetus for RISE, is, especially looking at, those students that are, coming in with lower high school GPA. So you see the top here across all these metrics, you're going to have the non-pilot results, and the bottom here, you're going to see the pilot results. And you can see there really was not a big shift between what happened in the fall 18, fall 19 group for the non-pilots. It stayed pretty consistent, 18%. And same with the pilots stayed about 14%. Where we're going to see the big differences is really when we start disaggregating by GPA. So the next slide is where you start seeing these different indicators. So here's where we're seeing really the big shifts for the pilots versus non-pilots. So we're seeing somewhat of a shift here. Percentage-wise, it's not big, but you know what? It went from 1 to 0%. At the same time, we see that the non-pilot groups are actually seeing increased success rates here. So that's why you see kind of this light yellow or light orange negative indicator here. But on the opposite end, you see with the college level math, you see the 2.2, 259, and 2.6 to 2.6 to 2.79 group have pretty big increases for the pilot schools, where it actually doubled their success rate for the 2.2, 2.59 group. And it also increased substantially too on the 2.6, 2.79 group. And at the same time, for non-pilots, we actually saw decreases across both of those groups. Now, we look at it from a demographic perspective. Once again, here's where we actually see, some equity challenge that we've had in the past, and we still have, as far as especially looking at things from, a race ethnicity perspective. But we see, 12-11% for, Black students compared to, around 20% for Hispanic and white students for the non-pilots. And we see similar, equity gaps, for the pilot groups as well. As far as, what's happened, with the RISE implementation, we do see some positive areas. So it's really not that evident here, but it did hit kind of the statistics I laid out here. So, while there's a slight decrease in success rates for non-pilots from 12 to 11, we did see a slight increase. I know it's 6 and 6, but it did go up a little bit here for the pilots. A pretty big increase too for Black females, as that increased for the pilots, as there was a pretty big drop in the success rates for non-pilots. And we also see the same thing for Hispanic males, but once again, both were kind of increasing. It's just that Hispanic males, the change exceeded the pilots versus what was non-pilots. So we look at college level English completion. Similar, equity concerns across the GPA piece historically. But this is where we really see a lot more differences across the group. So remember in math, we saw, some more positive signs as far as RISE versus, the non-RISE. Here's where we're starting to see actually some, decreases as far as, success rates overall. So, looking at the total for pilots versus non-pilots, overall we dropped 2%. At the same time, non-pilots increased 2%. Here's where we're seeing probably the biggest challenge here with the RISE colleges. And this is expected, because once again, these students are not eligible for, to take the co-rec or credit level in their first semester, not eligible also to take the placement test. But we do see big decreases, which we'd expect, but maybe not this big, but 13% to 3% drop for the RISE schools. And so that's why it kind of correlates with this negative sign here, as non-RISE schools are actually increased success rates. But at the opposite end, we see the 2 to 259 group, so the co-rec group, increased from 22 to 29% at the same time that we see non-pilots were decreasing 37 to 34. And then we do see some slight decreases for the 26279 group, as well as the less than 2.8 group, which really, this is really not related to policy since, there's really differences between the 2.8 group and above. And then also this unknown high school GPA, there is pretty substantial drop here, but once again, I think it's because a lot of these students probably fall in the less than 2.2 group. And then we also saw a difference in age too with this. So we do see as non-pilots were, increasing their success rates for under the age of 28. There's a slight decrease here for the pilots, but where the bigger drop is for the pilots was over the age of 28. So dropping from 29 to 21%. So that's a pretty big drop for that group there. Now looking from a demographic perspective and Pell perspective, once again, a lot of negatives across the board for college level English. Same with the drop as far as the 38, 36%. But here looking at the non-Pell and Pell, as the non-pilots were increased from 45 to 48, non-Pell dropped, and we also saw really drops in Pell too, from 35 to 33. Black students had a pretty substantial decrease compared to what we're seeing with non-pilots. They went from 24 to 22%, while there's actually increase of 29 to 32% for non-pilots. And for white students, we saw a drop at the same time. We saw really an increase for non-pilots. Then looking at race, ethnicity, and sex, pretty big drop here for Black females from 27 to 23%. Black males had a slight decrease, but as a slight decrease, same time as we saw increases for the non-pilots. Hispanic males, it was fairly flat, but once again, same time as we saw an increase for Hispanic males. And white females, slight decrease, same time as there was an increase for non-pilots. And then finally for white males, a 2% drop compared to the 3% increase for non-pilots. Okay, next one's looking at first semester completion of college level credits. So once again, this is any credits that are 100 or above. And once again, historically, we kind of see the gaps in that really credit hour completion rate amongst the different GPA groups. It's been more fairly flat over ages, but here's where we're actually going to see some decreases. For once again, the less than 2.2 group. As we saw the averages kind of go up for non-pilots, they went slightly down for the pilots. And we saw big increases here at 4.5 to 5.1 group for the 2.2. So it's the co-rec group. So these are students that are now taking college level coursework that they might not have before. So that might have something to do with the increase here from 4.5 to 5.1. And at the same time, we saw a drop of 4.9 to 4.5 for the non-pilot groups. And then the 2.6 to 2.79 group, we saw a decrease here at 6.5 to 6.0, same time that there's a slight increase for non-pilots. And that could possibly be attributed to that before this group was eligible to go straight in to college level math and English. Now they do have the co-rec, which has a developmental component to it. So that's possibly decreasing their college level load in their first semester. And then on the right-hand side, we do see a decrease in the age of 28 and over, and from 6.3 to 6.1. At the same time, for non-pilots, we actually see a slight increase. All right, so looking at from a Pell, race, ethnicity, and sex perspective, here's where we're also seeing, negatives pretty much a lot of these groups here. So across the non-Pell, we see Pell is flat, but it's also the same time we saw pretty big increases for the non-pilots. Looking at Black students, it's also flat, but once again, same time we're seeing an increase among the non-pilots. And for white students, we actually saw a drop from 7.8 to 7.6. At the same time, we saw it actually increase for non-pilots. Now looking across race, ethnicity, and sex, we kind of see similar things, and then kind of the white males is probably the big difference here, where there was a drop from 7.7 to 7.6. At the same time, there's a pretty big increase for non-pilots of 7.5 to 8. So fall to spring persistence. So here we're looking at, what percent of your first-time cohort actually persists in spring. And here's where we don't see as big of equity gaps, but they definitely still exist. But there's just a couple areas where, we kind of saw increase and decreases. It's not really that substantial. For instance, we saw this is a negative actually success rate decrease, but compared to the non-pilots, as far as less than 2.2 group, it's a slight positive. But then we saw a negative for the 2.2259 group, and then we saw a positive for the no GPA. So I'm not sure really how much insight it is from a GPA or age perspective here. So really gonna see a whole lot as far as from fall to spring persistence. And looking at from the demographic groups, we do see some slight increase and decreases here and there, but I doubt this is very much attributed to the policy itself. So this metric is I think it's great as far as looking from a student persistence perspective as far as overall, but I'm not sure really this policy is having really a big impact one way or the other. All right, so really I think the last two metrics are the most important ones. So I know we talked about what happens that first semester for math and English, but really kind of that first year I think you get a better picture as far as, because that way, those students that less than 2.2, maybe going to transitions, now have a possibility of going co-rec that could complete that first year. So once again, the first year kind of really is more a telling tale as far as how rapid are students actually getting through college level math and English. So with that 1 year time frame, we do see that that's still that historical success rate has been very low for less than 2.2, and as it goes up higher, as you get to the 2.8 group, where it's actually majority of those students are successful, and you see it kind of different for the pilot groups, but still a similar pattern. Now for math, really only from an annual for a year metric perspective, the only really negative here was the less than 2.2 group. So we see that the less than 2.2 group for non-pilots increased from 6 to 8, as we actually had the success rate drop from 4 to 2% for less than 2.2 group. But if you look at 2.2259 group, this is where for the non-pilots, there's actually a decrease in success rate from 17 to 14%. At the same time, there's an increase of 10 to 13% for the 2.259. So this probably once again has a lot to do with the co-rec model and students being able to enroll in college level coursework earlier. Okay, looking at from a demographic perspective, the big difference here, and also too, I think I guess I should have pointed out too that one of the reasons why you're kind of seeing these positives here with the flats is because of the big drops we're seeing overall because of COVID. So we had a lot of students leave us in the spring semester, so we'd expect these actually percentages to decrease, and we see for the non-pilots it decreased by 3%, but only 1% for the pilot groups. So in an area where we think there's a decrease, a really something that's flat is actually not a bad thing. So for Black students, it stayed consistent 11% for the pilots compared to a 4% drop for non-pilots, and then for Black females it was also flat. At the same time, there was a drop from 22 to 16% for Black females and non-pilots. Okay, the final metric is looking at the first year successful completion rate of college level English. And once again, we see less than 2.2 group struggling with the college level coursework completion metrics, a drop of 22% to 12%, compared to actually going up slightly for the non-pilots. The 2.2259 group slightly increased, but we saw pretty big drops for 2.2259 group for the non-pilots. And if we look at the age, we see big drops for the age 28 over, going from 44 to 34%, while there's only a slight decrease for the non-pilots. So if we look at kind of the big picture as far as, sorry, I got one more thing with these race ethnicity pieces. So here's where we're seeing really kind of a lot of negatives across the board as far as race, ethnicity, sex, and Pell, with Pell students actually dropping 48 to 43% for the pilots. We also see decreases across Black, Hispanic, and white populations, and also across most of the race, ethnicity, and sex, with probably the most substantial change being that Black male population going from 31 to 28% in their success rate. while at the same time the non-pilots were pretty flat. So overall, kind of going back to this matrix here, you know, I noticed a lot of colors here, but I think if you look across the rows or down the column, it kind of gives you an idea as far as directionally where we're seeing things. You know, if you look across these metrics, you know, looking at, you know, really rise compared to non-rise, you know, we don't see a lot of color as far as that first column there with college level math in first semester, but we do see, you know, some greens and light greens and so forth, and you know, really the only problem area is that less than 2.2 GPA group. Now the English piece is where things, you know, we see really across the board pretty big drops, and that's probably has a lot to do with the, you know, less than 2.2 group not being eligible to go into college level coursework or co-recs. And then looking at college level credits accumulated, this kind of looks like it's you know, possibly negative in general, except for the 2.2259 group. Like I said, not a whole lot to read into the fall to spring persistence rates. And you know, what we see in the first year, math success kind of correlates what we saw in first semester success rates. We're mostly greens, but the only trouble area is that less than 2.2 GPA. And then that first year success completion rate of college level English, you know, outside at 2.2259 group, mostly negative results across this group here. And if you look across the rows, you know, you focus on a GPA less than 2.2. If you look across there, it's mostly dark. You know, it's half dark oranges, some light oranges, and one light green. So you know, these students are not as successful as they were previously, or compared to non-rise. But on the total opposite end, you see the 2.2259 group across these metrics are very successful. So definitely a mixed bag of results. And I think that's the last slide, JW. So if there's any question, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you taking time this morning and preparing this presentation for all of us. We also have Susan Barbitta on the line for us. And so we'll, while she is making some comments from kind of an operational perspective, we have somebody who needs to mute their microphone. It might be.
Keeps me close, right? Which is smart.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we'll ask Susan Barbitta, who's been our leader in this area. I wanted to make sure she had an opportunity to make some comments, but if she's making some comments, I think the best way for us to field and answer questions is through the chat box. And then we'll open up to people on the telephone in a little bit. So while, if you want to, you can go ahead and start putting any questions that you might have in the chat box, and then hopefully between Bill and Susan and Dr. Gold and myself, we might be able to answer any of the questions that you might have. So Susan, the mic is yours.
Great, thanks JW. Bill, thanks for that more detailed analysis, even more so than we looked at on Sunday. So thanks for that, appreciate it. I think, you know, some of the key takeaways from here, which really just reiterating what you said, Bill, is that there appear to be, you know, with very limited data, you know, we don't want to look at things that are positive or negative, you know, make rash decisions because it is limited data, but it does appear that for students below 2.2, there are some challenges. And so perhaps the policy needs to be reevaluated. Perhaps the floor shouldn't be 2.2. There's an entire report from Complete College America that suggests some tweaks that we make to the model. It is exciting, again, with limited data, though, to see that the students 2.2 to 2.59 are being successful, and that's exactly what the COREC model is: get in the gateway, take the COREC for support, and be successful. Interesting that students, you know, in that 2.6 to 2.8 range in some of your metrics appear not to be faring as well as they had before. And so again, another look is necessary at that information. You know, from the beginning, the entire model and the rollout of it had time built in to look at data, you know, take your recommendations, Bill, and your team's recommendations, and make some tweaks to the model. Tomorrow is a RISE advisory board meeting that consists of deans, chief academic officers, presidents. Will be sharing your presentation again. I know you presented to this group a couple of weeks ago, but we'll be reiterating the data that you've shared today. The, again, recommendations from Complete College America, asking for their recommendations to the CAOs, then to the presidents, about what should the composition of committees be that we put together to really look at this analysis. Up until now, we have faculty committees, we have student services committees, but it's probably a good point in time where we need to get some input on a regular basis from our CAOs and then, of course, our presidents. So we'll be taking this information and moving forward with it, and coming back with recommendations from the RISE Advisory Board about how to improve on the model that we have and how to make North Carolina data look just like the data in every other state in the country that's moved to COREC, where it is absolutely successful and does reduce the equity gap. So it's okay, I think, that it's not great and fantastic right now. We're moving in the right direction. We just need to make some tweaks to the model. And can't thank you enough, Bill, you and your team, for the hundreds and hundreds of hours that you've spent analyzing the data. So happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or just thank you.
Susan, if I recall, the other states who implemented similar projects, they implemented multiple measures and the COREC model at the same time, whereas we've implemented multiple measures several years ago. Is that?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So those double-digit gains, the 20%, 30% increases that some other states have seen, we from the very beginning said we do not expect to see those enormous changes, because you're exactly right, JW. They had been running with one-time high-stakes placement tests and had not instituted any sort of multiple measures. So we definitely expected our increase in success rates to be less than in other states, but still showing positive results across the board, and especially when we disaggregate the data. That's part of the really exciting work of COREC, is it begins to reduce or shrink the equity and achievement. So we are looking to move to the model that brings us to the data we really would like to see, and we'll get there. This is a great first start, and shows us where there are some challenges, and we'll move in that direction with recommendations, as I said, from the advisory board, our CAOs, and ultimately our presidents.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. As we wait for maybe a couple of questions in the chat box, Bill, could you speak a little more to how COVID-19 is the confounding variable in all of this, and how we don't know for sure how it's impacting the results of not only RISE, but also our enrollment and student success measures in general?
Yeah, I mean, for this analysis, it definitely was, a big impact as far as the first year success rate, because, with COVID impacting the middle of spring semester, it wouldn't have any impact as far as our early metrics, as far as first semester, even kind of persistence. But, giving that student that full year to complete, we did see a decrease in the college level math and English, and we also, we are also seeing an impact across all our metrics as well. So, I think when we look at state performance measures, I think anything moving forward that was, that's inclusive of, what happened in 2020, we're going to see probably some, negative impact from a success rate. We not really assess all those, and we do know that, we're seeing, and I'm just going to throw this out there unofficially, approximately probably a 5% decrease in our overall headcount from fall to fall. But I think the silver lining is that some representative at the board was we're still not where the nation is, because looking at some reports coming out of National Clearinghouse, we're probably seeing 10% drops across the country, and if our drops are not quite that bad, then maybe we're doing a good job in North Carolina as far as retaining our students as best we can.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Susan, we do have one comment or question in the chat box that goes with Surge, and I'll read for you, especially for those on the telephone. Do you anticipate programs like Surge in high schools factoring into future considerations with placement?
So that's a great question. We've been working on Surge for a number of years with DPI and our LEAs, and the high schools will actually begin teaching the Surge English and the Surge Math course this spring semester. So the first impacts we'll see of that will be fall 2021. Students that have successfully completed any of the tiers in high school will then be placed appropriately at the community college. So we might see a decrease in the number of students that need credit-bearing courses with CORECs if the students have completed enough of that work in high school. We'll just need to really look at the data over a couple of fall semesters and see what it's telling us. But I do think there'll be some impact.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And then Barry Priest has a question. It seems like many of the 2018 percentages were already higher for the nonprofit or non-pilot, excuse me, schools, or the pilot schools, the starting percentages. Is this a coincidence?
I think it might be related to, really the makeups of the institutions. And, my guess is that probably the pilot groups were probably maybe hire more minority serving institutions, maybe serving more poor students or rural students, so I think probably to make up the institutions probably drove the differences in their success rates coming in. And that's why we didn't want to necessarily just kind of say, was the success rate this year of pilot versus non-pilot? It was more focused on what the shift was. So we were more comparing apples to apples across the history.
Okay, thank you, Bill. At this time, are there anyone on the telephone who would like to unmute because you don't have access to the chat box and would like to ask any questions? Or anyone else as far as that's concerned? Okay, while you're trying to find your unmute button, I would like to let everybody know and remind you that we are recording this presentation. And Bill, I assume you'll be able to share the slides with me and I can send it out to everybody.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you. And so we'll get those slides out and the link to this recording out to everybody as soon as those are available. And we do have another comment here in the chat box. It seems like with RISE implementation, experience is key. Have we looked at performance differences between cohort A schools and cohort B schools?
And we have, and that was actually one of the first dives that we did in the data. And it was definitely interesting, and I can't get the exact results, but overall, there really wasn't a huge difference, but there were certain metrics in which it seemed like, one cohort was more successful than another cohort. And I'm not sure if Susan remembers which metrics they were, cohort A would seem to be stronger than cohort B, but there was some slight differences here and there, but overall we saw directionally as far as, especially looking at things from a GPA perspective, that we saw the same thing across, the different, or, across the cohorts.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly either, Bill. I do know I was a bit surprised to see that the cohort A had not made more significant gains, by the second semester. But I also know that teaching computer-aided class and teaching the co-recs are challenging for faculty, and it's new. And we know that the first time faculty teach anything new is not the best, time to teach it. So we do know from our colleges that taught it the first semester, they are making lots of tweaks to the delivery, to the content of the co-rec, still staying within the RISE model, but really adjusting even their philosophy and their growth mindset about the courses. And so I would expect in about a year that we would see the cohort A performing at a higher rate than cohort B. And as much as we can factor in the differences in the colleges and which schools have been more of the underperformers compared to the overachievers, I'm not sure exactly how you factor that all into the equation, but I do expect that we'll see. But I think we need about a year for that to happen. You teach it once, it might not be your best iteration of it. You make some changes and tweaks, you offer it the next year, and then one more semester after that, we should really begin to see the differences in experience. So.
All right, thank you, Susan and Bill. So last opportunity for questions, either unmuting your mic or in the chat box. We'll pause here for about 10 seconds. Okay, not hearing or seeing any questions. I thank you, Bill, for your presentation and for all the work you and your team do to help us research a variety of initiatives and programs. I'm always impressed by your all's work and also by your timely response whenever we need help. So thank you, Bill, to you and your team. Susan, thank you for your leadership in this project and help keeping us moving forward and helping us to come up with a way to help our students who are needing assistance with their college level work, because we at the end of the day, that's the goal, is to help students and help them be successful in that way. So I'm glad that I appreciate your leadership in this. Also want to thank all of you guys out at the colleges for your work. We appreciate your diligence in serving students and to making sure they have what they need to be successful. We wish each and every one of you a happy holiday season. We hope you get some time off and get some relief and find some peace and rest and relaxation. I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you again probably not until around February, because we'll wait until after spring registration activity. So our next meeting will be sometime after January. I'll send that invitation in the future. Thank you guys, and I hope everybody has a happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. Have a great week.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you, Susan and JW.